pravṛttir bhūtānāṁ yena sarvam idaṁ tatam sva-karmaṇā abhyarcya siddhiṁ vindati mānavaḥ. By worship of the Lord, who is the source of all beings and who is all-pervading, man can, in the performance of his own duty, attain perfection. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupad. Everyone should think that he is engaged in a particular type of occupation by Hrishikesh, the master of the senses. And by the result of the work in which one is engaged, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, should be worshipped. If one thinks always in this way, in full Krishna consciousness, then by the grace of the Lord he becomes fully aware of everything. That is the perfection of life. The Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita, Tesham aham samudharata. The Supreme Lord Himself takes charge of delivering such a devotee. That is the highest perfection of life. In whatever occupation one may be engaged, if he serves the Supreme Lord, he will achieve the highest perfection. Translation: by worship of the Lord, who is the source of all beings and who is all-pervading, man can, in the performance of his own duty, attain perfection. We are reading from the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, which is entitled The Perfection of Renunciation. Here Krishna is describing the perfection of renunciation. Many people are under the conception that vairagya, or renunciation, means to renounce or give up all activities, to consider any action within the fold of a materialistic society to be illusion, and therefore to become inactive in the sense of going exclusively to a holy place or to be in seclusion, and, as they say, to just let the world go on its own way. That, of course, is a sense of renunciation. But Krishna in the 18th chapter is describing the perfection of renunciation. The perfection of renunciation is to work as Krishna wants you to work. After all, the Bhagavad Gita is being spoken to Arjuna to convince him to perform his duty of fighting a battle. Whereas Arjuna was in the mood of just renouncing everything and going to a holy place and chanting Hare Krishna. But Krishna was telling him that is a kind of renunciation. But real renunciation is, I've given you so many gifts. To use everything I've given you in my service is the perfection of renunciation. Everything is spiritual if it is used in the service of the spiritual source of everything. The difference between material and spiritual is the consciousness in which something is used. When we use a thing for our sense gratification, that is material. When we use that same thing in the service of Lord Hare, that is the perfection of renunciation. Srila Rupa Goswami has taught us, Prapanchakatya budya hari shambandi vashtona mamukshami parityago vairagam palgukatyate. That if you have something that can be used in God's service, and in the name of renunciation you give that up, that is called incomplete renunciation. Complete renunciation is to utilize everything Whatever intelligence you have, whatever energy you have, whatever wealth you have, whatever distinction within society you have, whatever abilities you have, to be conscious that they are all coming from Krishna and to utilize everything for Him. So here Krishna is explaining how the perfection of renunciation is to perform your duty for the all-pervading Supreme Lord, who is the source of all living beings. Or as described in Srimad Bhagavatam, Vara samsadir haritoshanam athapumbir vijastrestas varana shrama vibhagasha shvanustatasya dharmasya samsadir haritoshanam. That whatever your particular activity is within society, whether you are a Brahman, a Kshatriya, a Vaishya, or a Sudra, whether you are a Brahmachari, a Grihastha, a Vanaprastha, or a Sannyasi, whether you are a housewife or the Prime Minister, if you perform your duty for the sake of pleasing Krishna, that is the perfection of your life. Krishna says in the next verse, it is better to engage in one's own occupation, even though one may perform it imperfectly, than to accept another's occupation and perform it perfectly. Prescribed duties according to one's nature are never affected by sinful reactions. Some people are under the misconception that all activities within this world are sinful. Anything that is not done in the service of God is sinful. But the highest dharma is to simply perform your duties in Krishna consciousness for the pleasure of Krishna. But how do we know what is the pleasure of Krishna? For that, we must have the guidance of Krishna's representatives, the great sadhus. And factually, how Krishna best wants us to serve Him? A surrendered devotee allows Krishna to decide that. A neophyte devotee will perform his occupation according to the way he wants to do it for Krishna. But an advanced soul, his desire is, Krishna, how can I please you? Whatever you want, that is my duty. I would like to tell you a story. This narration explains the quality of such a surrendered soul, who is willing to do anything that Krishna so desires. You know, in South India, there are many great Vaishnava temples. There is the Venkateshwar temple in Tirumala, Tirupati. There is the temple in Srirangam of Sri Radhanath Swami. These two very famous temples are worshipped by the great descendants of Srila Ramanuja Acharya. Srila Ramanuja Acharya is one of the great founders of the four Vaishnava Sampradayas. There are four authentic, unbroken lines of disciplic succession in which the pure message of God has come down through the ages. One of them is the Sri Sampradaya. One of them is the Brahma Sampradaya, the Kumara Sampradaya, and the Rudra Sampradaya. Now, Ramanujacharya, he was that great, powerful spiritual master who revived and spread the glories of the Sri Sampradaya throughout all of India. Ramanujacharya was this disciple of a very, very great saint who had a very interesting life. His name was Jamunacharya. Do you know the story of Jamunacharya? Jamunacharya was a Brahmin, but he's famous within history as being a great king. So the question is, what is a great Brahmin doing on the throne of a king? He was not a descendant of a king. In fact, he was born as a son of Nata Muni, who was basically a sadhu. They had no money, nothing. So how did he become king? I'd like to tell you the story. When Jamunacharya was only 5 years old, he went to the Gurukula of his Guru Maharaj, whose name was Bhavashyacharya. Bhavashyacharya was a very learned and very humble, saintly person. And he trained Jamunacharya in Sanskrit grammar, in the study of the scripture, and in living a disciplined and pure life in devotion to God. When Ramanujacharya was 12 years old, he had grasped everything that his teacher had taught him when Jamunacharya was only 12 years old, completely. It was just a fantastic thing how he was just able to assimilate all his teachings immediately. Now it is described that one day his spiritual master, Bhavashyacharya, was away. And all of the other students, his classmates, they all had left for vacation. And in the school, he was the only one present. At that time, some visitors came. In those days, to be a pundit was very prestigious within Indian society. And your name as a pundit would become famous to the degree you were able to defeat other pundits. So scholars would challenge others, and if they would defeat, they would become victorious and become very famous. So there was one pundit at the time. His name was Kolahara. He was so incredibly learned that nobody could defeat him. His mind was so brilliant, and his knowledge of the scriptures was so thorough, and his pride was so mountain-like that he would just travel throughout the kingdom and challenge everyone. And he would absolutely massacre everyone in logic and argument. Now, because he was so expert at juggling words and defeating others, he became the favorite of the king. At this time, this was the Pandya dynasty. The king of the Pandyas really liked him very much. And therefore the king made a law that any pundit that is challenged by Kolahara must accept the challenge and must debate him. And if anyone loses to Kolahara, he must pay tax to the king every year. So, this visitor that came to the ashram where Jamunacharya's guru was teaching happened to be one of the disciples of Kolahara. And he came to collect tax. And he was in a very angry mood. He said, "I want to speak to your spiritual master, Bhavashyacharya." Jamunacharya was very mild, very sweet in his words, very gentle by nature. He said, "I'm sorry, my dear sir, but my Guru Maharaj is not here. Can I ask who you are and why you want him so badly?" He says, "Because your spiritual master is a rascal. My Guru Maharaj, who is the greatest of all learned scholars, who is undefeated in any argument, he completely defeated your spiritual master, and your spiritual master must pay tax, and because he has not paid tax in 2 years, we're about to put him to the death sentence. So we want him to pay." The 12-year-old boy said to this person, he said, "You are so proud that any spiritual master that allows such a foolish disciple to be so proud must also be a fool. I think your guru is a great fool." And besides that, if he's challenging everyone to a debate, he said, I want to debate him. This messenger of Kolahara became very angry. And he went back to his spiritual master, Kolahara, and he said, you know, this 12-year-old student of Bhavashyachari, he wants to challenge you to a debate. And Kolahara began to laugh. 12-year-old boy challenged me. He said, go tell the king about it. The king, he sent a message back to the child. Do you know, if you are defeated, you will be killed for the offense you have committed to the great Kolahara? Either you pay the taxes, or you debate him. But because of this offense, if you lose, you are dead. So Jamunacharya sent the message back, I will be very glad to debate with him. But if you want to debate with him, if you want me to debate with him, you have to send a royal palanquin to pick me up. At this time, Bhavashyacharya had returned, and he was thinking, oh my God, what have you gotten yourself into? Do you know who this man is? He completely defeated me. How are you going to do anything against him? Ramanujacharya said, don't worry about these things, just have faith in Lord Narayan. He will protect us. We are not the doers. If he wants me to win, I will win. If he wants me to lose, then who cares? So, the word spread throughout the city of Madurai. Madurai was then the kingdom of the king of the Pandyas. And everyone was very much restless, thinking, what a wonderful thing. A 12-year-old boy is challenging Kolahara, the greatest of all scholars. Who is this boy that could possibly stand up against such a stalwart debater? And this was the talk of the whole kingdom. And the Brahmins, who were all defeated by Kolahara, they all came to Jamunacharya and started offering their blessings. May the Lord be with you to defeat this rascal. He's so puffed up. So then what happened is the royal palanquin was sent to him. And as he was being carried with a royal procession, this little 12-year-old boy, the king and queen were sitting in their court, waiting for the match to take place. And the king was bragging about his greatest pundit, Kolahara. And he said to his queen, he said, this Kolahara, just like a cat plays and destroys a mouse, that is how he's going to defeat this child. And the queen looked at him. She said, I have information that this is not an ordinary child. If you want to know my opinion, just like a little tiny spark can burn to ashes an entire mountain of cloth, in this way, this child will destroy your pride and joy, Kolahara. He will be Alabandara, which means the conqueror. The king, he said, how can you speak like this? What chance does this child have against the greatest pundit in all the world? He said, Queen, if you take this, if you are saying this seriously, make a wager. I want to bet with you. The queen said, all right, if your Kolahara wins this debate, I vow that I will become the servant of your maidservant. And then the king said, well, I vow that if this 12-year-old little child defeats the great scholar Kolahara, that I will give half of my kingdom to that boy. So they decided, all right, let it be. At that time, the child came in on the palanquin, very humble, very gentle, offering obeisances to everyone. And the great Kolahala was sitting there. And he began the debate. It began that Kolahala began to challenge Ramanujacharya with simple questions about Sanskrit grammar. And Ramanuja was answering them. He said, "What do you think? I'm so stupid that you have to ask me such elementary questions. Give me something hard. This is a debate." So then he began to ask him very, very sophisticated, difficult, and challenging philosophical questions. And without the slightest effort, Jamunacharya was just answering everything. Through all the prowess of Kolahala, he could not question anything to Jamunacharya that he could not answer with ease. So then Jamunacharya, with very gentle, humble voice, he said, "My dear sir, you are asking me such easy questions. Why don't you give me some challenge? If you can't ask me any hard questions, then let me ask you 3 questions. And if you cannot answer my 3, if you cannot refute, if you cannot defeat my 3 questions, if you cannot prove that I'm wrong, then you have to accept defeat." He said, "All right." Now, of course, great scholars, they could juggle words in so many ways that anything you tell them, they can refute that it's wrong. So Kolahala, he knew the science. He said, "All right, no problem." So Jamunacharya said, "My first challenge to you is to defeat this. That your mother was not a barren woman." Kolahala began to think, what kind of question is this? If I defeat him, then I have to prove my mother was a barren woman. If she was a barren woman, then I would not have taken birth. He was thinking like this, and he began to perspire. It was the first question in history he couldn't defeat. He turned pale, and he could not say anything. And everyone in the king's court was just silent as they saw him without any words in his mouth. And then Jamunacharya said, then let me present my second challenge to you. Try to defeat this. That the king is the supremely most righteous man in all the kingdom. Kolahala was thinking, my God, if I prove that he's not a righteous man, he's going to kill me. So he remained silent. So then Jamunacharya, he said, my third challenge to you is to defeat this. That the queen who is sitting right in front of you, that she is chaste and faithful only to her husband. He was thinking, my God, if I try to refute that, the queen will be very angry and then I will be finished. So then Kolahala, he became very angry. He just lost his temper like anything. And he got up and he started to scream. He said, well, these are nonsense questions. They cannot possibly defeat it. Not only that, they're blasphemy against the king and the queen. I challenge you, you refute these questions. And if you cannot, then you should be killed for slandering and blaspheming the king and the queen. And at that time, everybody stood up from Kolahala's camp of disciples, and they all said, yeah, this man should be killed. This child should be killed. What nonsense questions. And then everybody else stood up and said, no, this child, he's putting forth good questions. The Pandit Kolahala could not defeat them. The condition was not that he had to answer them. He must step down from his position and accept defeat. And in this way there became a huge argument amongst both sides. And Jamunacharya, he stood up, he raised his hand, he said, silence. And everyone was silent. And the 12-year-old child said, He said, I will now completely defeat and refute all of these 3 challenges. And everyone was in a hush. And Kolahala said, it's impossible. How can you do? without offending. He said, first of all, Kolahala, according to the Manu Samhita, if a woman only has one child, she is considered a barren woman. And you are the only son of your mother, therefore, according to Shastra, she is a barren woman. Everyone was very silent. And my second challenge is to refute the argument that the king is a supremely righteous man. Kolahala said, how are you going to defeat that without offending the king? He said, according to the Shastra, the king takes 1/6 of the pious and impious acts of the whole kingdom, all the citizens. And because it is Kali Yuga, naturally there's more impious acts than pious acts. So although the king personally is the most righteous and most pious and most noble and honorable and religious man, 1/6 of all the unrighteousness of all the citizens are a burden on his back. So in this way, he is not supremely righteous. And the king smiled. He felt very glorified when you hear this. And Kolahala began to become very worried. My God, he could not say a thing. And then Kolahala said, and what about the queen? He said, my third challenge to you is to defeat the fact that the queen is faithful and chaste only to her husband. The queen was very attentive and the king was very attentive. And all the guards with their swords were also very attentive. Everyone was very attentive for this. There was a hush of utter silence. And then Jamunacharya spoke. This beautiful 12-year-old little boy. He said, according to the Shastra, my dear Kolahala, you should know these things. Within the king is 8 principal demigods. Varuna, Chandra, Vayu, Indra, Yama, Kuvera, Surya, and one other. All these 8 great demigods are always present within the king. The king is the representative of these great demigods. So although the queen is the most faithful and most chaste of all women in her service to her husband, at the same time, she's serving 8 other husbands, so she's not exclusively chaste and faithful only to him. At that time, the king was so happy that he leaped from his throne. He embraced Jamunacharya, this child. He put the garland of victory around him. And he said, my dear boy, never have we seen anyone like this. He said, today I award you half of my kingdom. And he was coronated on that day. Although he was just a poor little poverty-stricken Brahmin boy, he was made king of half of the Pandya dynasty. And he was a very great king. And he ruled the citizens perfectly according to the highest spiritual principles. And he himself became the spiritual master of Ramanujacharya, one of the greatest proponents of Vaishnava philosophy in history. Now, Jamunacharya, although totally inexperienced in this line of life, he accepted it because he could see that it was the arrangement of God. And with the blessings of his spiritual master, he became king. And he became perfect king. Why? Because whatever he did it simply for the purpose of pleasing Lord Hare. Whether he was a little Brahmin boy pleasing his spiritual master by studying Sanskrit, or begging alms door to door, or carrying water, or collecting firewood, the most menial services he was rendering as a brahmachari. And the next day he was put on the throne to rule armies, to organize an entire kingdom. As far as he was concerned, there's no difference between begging alms door to door, collecting wood, or ruling the kingdom. If this is what Krishna wants me to do, I will do it to please him. This is the consciousness of a Krishna conscious person. This is the real quality of a surrendered soul. Whatever Krishna wants, that is what I want. And whatever we do, if we do it exclusively for the purpose of pleasing Krishna, that is the perfection of renunciation. We should not be attached to anything except pleasing Krishna. We should not be attached to any occupation, to any prestige, to any position in society. These things are all an illusion unless we are accepting them in the service of God. If we accept them in the service of the Lord, it becomes Sanatan Dharma, the highest perfection of life. So whether you are a businessman, a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, an architect, a stock consultant, a student, a housewife, whatever your position may be in society, whether you're a brahmachari, grihasta, or a king, these things are not very important. The important thing is why you do it and who you do it for. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructed us, Naham vipro na cha narapatir napi vaishyo na sudro naham varani na chagri hapatir nova na stolkyatirva kintu pro janakilam parmananda punamratadver gopi bharatur padakamalayora das das anudas. I am not a Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra. I am not attached to the position of being a sannyasi, vanaprastha, grihasta, or brahmachari. My only aspiration in life and the only position I will identify with in life is that I am the servant of the servant of the servant of the servant of the Lord. If the Lord wants me to be king, I will be king for him, depending on his mercy. If the Lord wants me to be a beggar, begging alms for my guru, then I will be a beggar. This is the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. This is the perfection of renunciation. Whatever is our occupation, according to the arrangement of God, to perform it for his pleasure. And this consciousness, this divine spiritual consciousness, which creates this quality within our life, is most readily awakened through the process of associating with persons who are surrendering to Krishna. Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Sastra Koi, Lavamatra, Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Siddhi Hoy. By associating with sadhus, the path to liberation and all the doors to the highest perfection of life are opened wide. And what is it that the sadhus will teach us? They will teach us to perform our duty in the service of Lord Hare. And they will teach us that love, that divine realization, which is required to offer our services in God's service, can be realized through the process of chanting his holy names. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. By chanting the sweet sound of Krishna's name with attention and devotion, our natural propensity to serve and to love the Lord will awaken from within our heart. And through this process, we can perform our everyday duties of life in the spirit of the perfection of renunciation. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Actually, the importance of the holy name of the Lord was also disseminated by Jamunacharya. Jamunacharya told Ramanuja, his disciple, that I have a mantra, and this mantra is so powerful that anyone who chants it will attain the supreme perfection of prema bhakti, love of God. He said, but I will only initiate you in this mantra when I am convinced that you are a very serious and surrendered soul, because it's not a cheap thing. So Ramanujacharya, for many, many months, he was going to his guru, walking a long, long distance, and his guru would always tell him why he wasn't ready. And then after seeing that his disciple was so anxious just to serve, without expecting anything in return except more service, he was completely unconditional. Then Jamunacharya felt, now you are fit for initiation, for diksha. But this is a secret mantra, and you should not let anyone else hear it. You must keep it only to yourself. And then Jamunacharya whispered the mantra in Ramanuja's ear. And then this took place in Sri Rangam. And then Ramanuja went to the top of the Gopuram and he called for everyone in Sri Rangam to come. Special meeting. And everyone came. And he said, I have a mantra that's so powerful that anyone who chants it will get liberated from all disease, from all suffering of birth, old age, disease, and death. And they will attain the supreme perfection of prema, love of God. So everyone repeat after me, Om Namo Narayana. And tumultuously everyone was chanting, Om Namo Narayana. And Jamunacharya heard this. My God, what is this? Secret? The whole town is chanting it. So he called Ramanuja. Ramanuja, you're supposed to be such an obedient disciple. I told you that this is a secret. Why are you telling everybody? He said, Guru Maharaj, I know by disobeying your order I'm going to go to hell. But if anyone who chants this mantra is going to go back to Godhead, then let everyone else go back to Godhead and I'll go to hell. I don't mind. And then Jamunacharya was so happy. Tears flowed from his eyes and he embraced his disciple. And he said, you have captured the essence of my mood, the essence of compassion. You should be willing to go to hell to uplift others with the holy name of God. There is no greater uplifter. There is no more auspicious element within the entire existence than the name of God. It is the essence of auspiciousness. It is the essence of religion. It is the essence of life to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And by chanting and with this faith, with this devotion, then whatever we do will naturally be an expression of our unlimited love for Krishna. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.